to the center of the earth. It was still quite early in the morning, but once again the sun was burning mercilessly from the sky. A large well drilling machine now stood on Martin's farm. One worker was in charge of operating the drill, while another supervised the positioning. Roger stood with Mrs. Martin at their place and watched skeptically. A long way down already and still nothing. Although he and his mother stood shoulder to shoulder, Roger had to shout over the thunderous grinding of earth. The worker looked at him, unmoved. "You're not the only ones with this problem, you know. Water is scarce all over Falkenstein due to the drought." "Fine, then we'll drill the hole even further," Roger decided. The worker shrugged his shoulders. "We can drill to the center of the earth if you'd like. It's all a question of cost." "They're drilling a hole in our wallet," Mrs. Martin sighed. She turned away and went towards the house. Roger and the worker looked at her helplessly. "Mom!" cried Roger. That was a yes, this time releasing a shout of her own. Even though Count Falco supported her in the drilling of the well, she insisted on paying her own contribution. The drilling noises penetrated the bedroom walls where the girls were still sleeping. "Oh no! What's making all that racket?" murmured Bibi, stuffing her head under an oversized pillow. "They're drilling a new well," answered Tina sleepily. It took her a lot of effort to open her eyes. "Have they still not found water?" Bibi straightened up. Sleep was out of the question in any case with all that commotion. Besides, it was already so hot again. "You know what? We should go to the lake today. Let's take the horses with us. They also need to cool down." "Good idea," Tina agreed, throwing her pillow aside. Ready for a new day. Mrs. Kim Win-Win. Meanwhile, Count Falco was sitting serenely at his desk in the cool air of his study. Before him lay a new horseshoe he had bought for his collection. He took measurements with keen interest, followed by a careful entry of notes. Then Ethelbert entered the library. Count Falco had seen him approaching through an open half of the study's large double doors and was happy to put the horseshoe aside to greet his butler. "Ah, Ethelbert, tea is served." But the Count suddenly stopped himself. Behind Ethelbert stood a young woman, the same lady who had met Bibi and Tina in the meadow. This time she was wearing a pink pantsuit and looked splendid. A yellow backpack hung loosely over her shoulder, and she was carrying a small wooden box decorated with Asian characters. Ethelbert turned to introduce her. "Mrs. Kim Win-Win," she added, hinting at a little bow. With both hands, she handed Count Falco a business card. "Head of Global Business at Win-Win. I am interested in your gray gold of the North." She looked with open curiosity around the room. Count Falco stared at the card. Kim Win-Win smiled courteously. "May I sit down?" The Count winced. How rude of him! He quickly took a seat on one of the two sofas in the spacious study and motioned Mrs. Kim Win-Win to the one opposite. "Of course, please, excuse me." While his new guest sat down, Count Falco asked, somewhat confused, "You'll have to forgive me, but I don't quite understand. Gray gold?" The woman took the glass container, which she had filled at the Martins' farm pasture, out of the wooden box and presented the contents to Count Falco like a great treasure. Gravel. Ethelbert was not amused at how the young lady had captivated the Count, and he quickly approached her with his tray. "Tea." "Aha!" said Count Falco, taking a cup from the tray. Ethelbert turned to Kim Win-Win and offered her the other cup, which in fact was his own, as the Count and his servant were in the habit of taking a break together around this time of day. Nonetheless, Kim Win-Win thanked him politely and gladly accepted the offer. Count Falco, still caught off guard by his new guest, continued the conversation. "Well, so, Miss Kim Win, have we met before? Do I know your boss, perchance?" Kim Win-Win smiled as if she was expecting this question. "I am the boss." She was young, but she had experience, filling the room with a daunting aura. She explained, "Natural resources are valuable assets. Gravel is the future, the foundation for up-and-coming cities, and you, good Count, have so much of it." Count Falco looked to Ethelbert for help, then back to his guest. Please continue. Kim Win-Win now quickly pulled out her tablet. I've made an overview. Your resources are truly impressive. She quickly called up a few notes she had made on Count Falco's lands and surroundings. Count Falco laughed, flattered. Meanwhile, Ethelbert watched the young woman from the corner of his eye. Kim Win-Win kept typing on her tablet. That includes the Martin's Farm pasture. Count Falco nodded in agreement. She had apparently done some really good research. Precisely there, underneath, there's a fascinatingly big gravel deposit, explained Kim Win-Win enthusiastically. With a penetrating look, she added, Name a price, and I'm sure we can find an agreement. The monocle fell from Count Falco's eye. He began to take a sudden interest in the matter. I see, but then my hands are tied, he stammered. I've leased Martin's farm to Mrs. Martin, and that's... For many years, Ethelbert interrupted him. How could Count Falco blabber on so much? Yes, the Count confirmed rather sheepishly. For a brief moment, the kindness in Kim's face slipped away. But she quickly regained composure. Ethelbert, who had not failed to notice, regarded her with suspicion. The woman sipped the tea and let her gaze wander through the library. Her eye was caught by the portrait of Falco and Alexander von Falkenstein, which they had made only recently. Ah, your son, the Count confirmed, nodding. A handsome boy, she flattered the Count. Alexander's father thanked her with pleasure. The portrait had been quite successful, he thought. The Count was impressed by Kim Win-Win, no question about it. So young and already so enterprising. His son could certainly take a page out of her book. Hey, boys. Bibi and Tina galloped over the meadows of Falkenstein on Sabrina and Amadeus on their way to the lake. Chico rode Tricky a few lengths ahead. Mrs. Martin had generously given him the day off, as he had already proven to be quite an eager helper. He had mucked out the stable and fixed the fence, so he'd earned the right to a little fun, she figured. Suddenly, Tricky got scared and turned to the side. Not a second later, Chico flew over the horse's neck in a high arc and unrolled skillfully on the ground. Tina and Bibi parried their horses while Chico got back on his feet. I thought you could ride, Bibi asked, shocked. Certamente. Falling off is a part of riding. The main thing is to get up again. Venga! With a laugh, the young Spaniard swung into the saddle and galloped off again. Bibi watched him with amusement. He was right, of course. On the other hand, he was definitely a real show-off. Freddie and his two buddies, Hank and Klops, were also on their way to the lake. The three of them roared on their mopeds across the road through the forest and came to a halt in the parking lot above the beach. They pulled off their helmets, grabbed their bathing suits, and ran to the bathing area. When Bibi, Tina, and Chico arrived at the road, Chico hummed to himself. This is my song about German girls. Very pretty, he explained as they got off their horses. The song or the girls? Tina joked lightheartedly. Both, of course, Chico replied with a casual gesture. Tina grinned at Bibi, who rolled her eyes. What a big mouth. Well, you can only write good songs in Spanish, Chico claimed pompously. They tied their horses to a fence near Freddie, Hank, and Klops' mopeds. Unfortunately, too many bathers were already camping on the shoreline, so they couldn't take the animals near the water. Besides, imagine having to clean up horse droppings on the beach. Chico looked around enthusiastically. Bam! What a place to write songs! He jumped over the fence and strolled down the meadow to the water. Bibi looked after him, annoyed. What a dork! Did we have to take that rodeo clown with us? Tina smiled. Why do you always get so high and mighty around Chico, eh? I'm not getting all high and mighty, Bibi objected as she ran down to the water with Tina. There are guys who... She paused suddenly when Freddie jumped in their way. Hey, girls! He was already in his bathing suit, like Hank and Klops. The three boys smiled coolly at the girls. Tina rolled her eyes and imitated Freddie's tone of voice. Hey, boys! What a beautiful day, Hank chimed. To meet such beautiful people, Klops joined in. They both laughed. Bibi and Tina exchanged a weary look. It was just getting better and better. These guys are from my band, Freddie introduced the other two boys. Since 2 days we've been... He indicated with his fingers how close they were. Yes, sir, together, as a band. Tina threw Bibi a look of feigned excitement. Amazing, Bibi nodded. What else could one say to this pointless performance? Klops held up a bottle of sunscreen. Would one of you two like to smear my back? Bibi shook her head. No thanks. We don't even know each other. Freddie grabbed the sunscreen bottle and held it out to Tina. But we know each other. To Bibi's surprise, Tina agreed. Where then? Just on the back. Freddie looked triumphantly at his equally stunned buddies. See, boys? That's the way to do it. He turned to face away from Tina, who, with a mischievous grin on her face, took the bottle and squeezed it nearly empty all over his shoulders before handing it back to Klops. Freddie looked at her, surprised. What about smearing? Bibi smiled as Tina explained, Your boys can do that. You've been together for 2 days. They can rub it in. And with that, the two girls left a stunned Freddie standing there. Now Hank and Klops were grinning. Is that how it was done? But Freddie also had to smile. Tina was just so cool. Meanwhile, up at the parking lot, a boy had approached Amadeus and Sabrina. What were these horses doing here? On a whim, the boy untied them and ran away with a grin. Curious at their unexpected freedom, the two horses set off on a tour of their own. How mermaids lure admirers. Bibi and Tina continued walking towards the shore. But what was going on? There was a platform out in the water and a row of... The friends could hardly believe their eyes. Mermaids! Or, more precisely, girls their own age, painted lavishly in makeup, whose legs were wrapped to their bellies in oversized, colorful fishtails so they could actually swim like mermaids. Seeing as how her boyfriend was having a lively conversation with their team leader, Dora. Dora flashed a smile at Alex. So, I'll just say something about why I founded this group and what's important about mermaiding? Alex nodded enthusiastically. Yes, exactly. Why hadn't he told Tina that he would be here this morning? She shouted out his name. Alex turned in astonishment. What are you doing here? Bibi grinned. Well, what does one normally do here? When Alex hesitantly replied, Swimming? She nodded. Right, but what are you doing here? Alex pointed to his microphone in the small transmitter. I'm about to go live. Tina pointed suspiciously to the girls on the platform. But who are all these characters? Alex answered with a certain pride in his voice. They're mermaids. Dora smiled at him with a look of gratitude. And you're Neptune, or what? Tina called out. I want you to get out of the water right now. But Alex only chuckled incredulously. Tina, please, I have to concentrate. This is live, in a minute. Outraged, Tina watched as Dora clapped her hands. Let's go, mermaids! The fish-tailed girls were already splashing about in the water, synchronized with their fins, chanting, Alex, 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 Alex. Dora smiled boldly at Alex and said, This is how mermaid suitors are drawn to her. Alex eagerly held up his tape recorder to the radiant mermaids. Tina's jaw dropped open. I beg your pardon? But before she could complain any further, she heard the unmistakable holler of a horse's neigh. Sabrina was burrowing her snout nearby in one of the overflowing trash cans, hunting for sugary leftovers. Sabrina, you rascal! Exclaimed Tina. Who untied you? Then she discovered her own horse, and Amadeus is taking a shower. Amadeus had positioned himself under one of the beach showers behind the Caribbean-style kiosk. A girl stood beside him, visibly annoyed that this immovable beast had cut her place in the line. Bibi and Tina rushed over to her. Well, Amadeus, seems you like to keep clean, Bibi laughed. Can I go now? Whimpered the girl. Of course, Bibi nodded as she led Amadeus out from under the shower. Sabrina had wandered on, finding a comfortable place in the shade of a decorative palm tree beside a small snack bar. The girls brought the two horses together and set a bucket of water in front of the animals. "Look, Sabrina, you can freshen up with this." When Tina asked who had unhitched the horses, Bibi was about to respond when she noticed that her best friend's attention wasn't at all on the horses. Instead, Tina's face was fixed in a scowl as she glared at Alex and the mermaids. Bibi teased her amusedly. "Tina, jealousy makes you ugly." And according to Bibi, jealousy was inappropriate nonsense anyway. Alex was and remained Tina's boyfriend. She was sure of that. "I'm not jealous, I just don't like to share," Tina replied. The girls stared at each other, pulling sour faces until both broke into a peal of laughter. Why should one bother with such nonsense when they could spend a wonderful day by the water? Chico had sat down on the pier to work on his music, so engrossed in his notebook that he hadn't even noticed any of the lakeside drama. Splish Splash. The time had come. Funky Farnsworth sat in the studio and made the official introduction. "This is Funky Farnsworth from Radio Flamingo, ad-free, unbiased, and impeccable. Now I'd like to hand this broadcast over to our field reporter, Alexander von Falkenstein, at the lake." Alex, who was still standing in the water, took over the live broadcast. "And now the world premiere of Splish Splash by the Falkenstein Mermaids," he said into the microphone. "We are Radio Flamingo." Suddenly, something squeaked in his headphones and he had to interrupt. "Excuse me, just a few minor technical problems. He started again, but didn't get far. Freddie rammed him with a huge inflatable yellow swimming duck. Then Hank and Klops followed, throwing themselves loudly into the water with a crab-shaped swimming island and paddled away. The mermaids had remained tense, holding their positions throughout the interruption. Alex finally continued his announcement. "And now, let the show begin." The girls jolted into action as the music began. The performance was underway. Splash! Alex watched the show with satisfaction while Dora sat a bit elevated on the platform, surrounded by her mermaids. The glittery girls slipped into the water and swam their synchronized choreography with utmost precision. More and more swimmers had now gathered on the beach to check out the show and groove to the music. Even Bibi and Tina, who were eating an ice cream in the Caribbean hut, rocked to the beat. Everyone at the kiosk, including the children and the saleswoman, seemed hooked on the rhythm. It would have been the perfect scene had it not been for Freddie, Hank, and Klops, who mimicked the mermaids' dance on their inflatable animals while shooting at them with pump soakers and an armory of baseball-sized water balloons. Dora tried not to let it upset her and continued to cheer the girls on. "Be brave, girls, you're rocking it!" Though Funky could not see Freddie, Hank, and Klops disturbing the mermaid's performance from where she sat in the studio, Alex watched the boys nervously from the edge of the lake. What should he do? Interrupt the performance? They were live on the radio. Dora bravely cheered them on to the end. At the roar of applause from the beachside spectators, Alex sank down exhausted on a big pink flamingo swimming ring and closed his live broadcast with the words, "Yes, I leave you with only this. Mermaiding is fun. The boys had fun too, but not quite the way everyone would have liked it. Thanks, mermaids, and now back to the studio." Mermaid Girls. Bibi and Tina watched from the shore as Dora and the mermaids swam back to the platform. Freddie and Hank were still splashing around. Chico also got wet. "Okay, stop. It's not cool," he complained. Klops, who had climbed onto the pier, took him in with disbelief. "What did you say?" "Who are you?" Hank wanted to know and swam closer on his crab. "Soy Chico de la Mancha, and unlike you, I know how to behave." He stood up. "Macha?" Hank looked dumbfounded. Klops jeered. "Macha? I think you want to be macho, eh?" "What do you think Macha has to say, huh?" Hank asked Klops as he grabbed Chico's songbook. Chico fought him off. "Hey, that's mine!" Klops smiled. You a poet or something? No, he's a musician. I know him. Freddie tried to calm the situation, but Klops had no intention of letting the book go when Chico tried to take it back from him. He opened the book and rifled through the pages before throwing it straight up into the air. Chico watched in dismay as all of his notes arced over the pier and landed in the water. Reproachfully, though for once nearly speechless, he turned to Klops and said, Those are my... Klops suddenly shoved him hard against the chest and exclaimed, Well, go and get them then! Chico fell backwards into the water, immediately flailing in panic and yelling, Ayuda! Help! Help! Klops eyed him with amazement. Are you kidding me? He turned to Freddie and said, He's messing with us. Is this a trick? Hank stammered, clearly overwhelmed. Klops nodded. I'm not going to jump in there now. He's bluffing. But Freddie shook his head. Oh man, this is real. Chico struggled even more while the boys looked on. Unable to calm the panic, he could barely keep his head above water. Help! He screamed. Bibi was the only one who knew right away that Chico needed help. She bolted off to the jetty and with a bit of witchcraft, changed mid-stride from riding clothes into a swimsuit and launched head-first into the water towards Chico. Tina struggled to get off her riding clothes quickly and ran towards the beach to help. Bibi could just manage to pull Chico up past the water's surface. She dragged him like a lifeguard to where Tina and Alex were already waiting. Together, they hauled him further up the shore to where he could rest. The young Spaniard seemed quite dazed by the whole affair. Bibi started mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, which surprised Tina and Alex a bit, as Chico was not at all unconscious. He straightened up with a cough and slicked back his hair. Alex patted him on the back and asked him gently, Are you okay? Bibi jumped up angrily and yelled at Freddie, Hank, and Klops. And you? What about you? Cause a whole lot of trouble and then sit back on your fat, good-for-nothing behinds? It was obvious that Freddie had a bad conscience, and he defensively offered a lame excuse. How could anyone have known that he can't swim? Hank simply cracked his knuckles coolly. How come the Spaniard thinks he can tell us what to do in the first place, huh? Klops didn't want to put up with Bibi's anger either. We were only joking. Bibi stared at them in disgust. Joking? Chico almost drowned. Tina nodded her approval, furious at the boys. Picking on the mermaids, mocking the show, and then even throwing plastic into the lake? With that, she pointed to the remains of the water balloons. Freddie grinned crookedly. Oh, don't get all Greta Thunberg on me. At least Freddie had heard of Greta Thunberg, so he had to know how important it is to protect the environment. That included not hurling garbage into the wild. Chico whined. My notes are lying around everywhere. Freddie couldn't resist a sassy answer. Maybe you should go and collect them. That was enough for Bibi. Enraged, Bibi raised her arms towards Freddie, Klops, and Hank. Eeny meeny bullying boys fail. Cover their legs in a mermaid's tail. Whiz, whiz. It happened so fast that Tina and Alex couldn't even grasp what they were seeing. Where they had only seconds ago been standing, the three boys were now lying down sideways, flapping their giant mermaid fins against the pier. Adorned with bright makeup and long glittery braids, they were nearly unrecognizable. Horrified, Klops glanced at his new fin, aghast by his own movements as it flapped the ground beneath him. What is that? Get rid of it! Hank's whole body shuddered. Guys, how did she do that? Man, she used magic. She's a witch, Freddie explained. In utter disbelief, Chico thought that maybe he had drowned after all and was now stuck in some bizarre dream. He shifted his gaze incredulously from the boys back to Bibi, who was buckled over with Tina in a fit of laughter. She was a what? The mermaids continued to wriggle like fish on dry land. Hank begged, Could you maybe change us back? Please? Please? Tina looked at Bibi curiously. The boys had learned their lesson. She was sure of it. Bibi nodded. Okay, but I'll only do it if you collect all the miserable rubbish here, from one end of the shoreline to the other, and whatever's in the water, and not just today. Freddie, Hank, and Klops nodded. Promise! As long as they got rid of their fins and those silly glittery pigtails. Bibi raised her arms and shouted, Eeny, meeny, flapping fish, give these boys their stand-up wish. Whiz, whiz. Big show. The boys were beyond relieved to be standing on the pier again, back to normal in their swimming trunks. But Bibi was not quite finished. Eeny, meeny, shoreline drags, give these fellas garbage bags. Whiz, whiz. Freddie, Hank, and Klops found themselves gripping an oversized recyclable collection bag, big enough not only for their own garbage, but all the trash at the lake. And don't forget, I'm a witch, and I can always see when you're doing a lousy job, said Bibi. Hank looked at her, intimidated. Always? Sorry, Bibi, it won't happen again, Freddie repented. Come on, boys. The three bandmates hurried away to collect their first trash. You're really a witch? Asked Chico. Incredible! Bibi nodded. All that's missing is a thank you. For what? Chico asked. For saving your life? Bibi replied. In Spain, we have a saying for that. Gratitude is the man himself. I'm still here and you're not happy about it, Chico replied with a titter. Bibi stared at him in disbelief. Fine. Tina and Alex grinned. Bibi and Chico really seemed to have their own special relationship. Right at that moment, the mermaids came to say farewell. Bye, Alex. Dora gave him one last radiant smile. Tina regarded this with suspicion, just as Alex complimented the Mermaid Queen on her performance. Thank you. Ciao. That was a fantastic show. With a lurking face, Tina asked him, She's quite nice. Pretty, isn't she? Alex looked at her bewildered. I don't know, Tina. It's professional. You're not jealous now, are you? Bibi was curious what Tina would answer. Tina hesitated before giving herself a mental reminder and smiled. Jealousy makes you ugly, she said. Only now did Alex notice that Tina had not yet been in the water. But didn't you want to go swimming? Tina nodded. Yes, I would, but... She looked at her watch and was startled. Dang it, it's so late already. She turned to Bibi. Bibi, we have to help Mom. The two girls ran frantically to their horses. No sooner had they disappeared from the boys' sight than Alex looked at Chico. Tell me, can you really not swim? Just a little bit, he replied, embarrassed. Alex smiled knowingly. You swallowed a lot of water for a little bit. He gave Chico a concentrated look. Should they take the opportunity to do something about this? Meanwhile, Freddie, Hank, and Klops diligently picked up the garbage on the beach and dumped the first load into an overflowing bin by the snack bar. The young salesgirl eyed them with interest. While you're here, you can clean up back there and sweep up front, she shouted. Do it yourself, Freddie replied. We're not your servants. You could also have some sort of deposit system, you know? The girl sat on her bar stool and looked down at Freddie from above. This isn't my shop. I'm just doing my job. Think you've got a better idea, expert? She raised a crutch and pointed to her leg, which was in a cast. Apparently, she had hurt herself so badly that she had trouble walking. Then Hank stood up near the counter and announced, Come on, boys, she's right. He casually threw the garbage bag over his shoulder and smiled at the salesgirl. Hey, don't worry. I'll take care of it. The salesgirl didn't move a muscle. Klopp was quite amused by Hank's flirtatious approach. Well, what's going on here? And the band broke up, Freddie couldn't resist saying. The girl coolly interrupted. Here's a broom, she said, pointing beside the snack bar. Reluctantly, Freddie grabbed the broom and the three boys moved on. Bibi and Tina were just about ready to ride back to Martin's farm, with Amadeus and Sabrina waiting for them to hop in the saddle. With a last look at Chico, Tina remarked, Why didn't you use magic to get Chico out of the water? I mean, it would have been easier. I just wanted to see if I could still do it. I am a registered lifeguard, you know. Bibi tried to play this down modestly. And the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? Tina didn't let up. Bibi grinned. Well, that is part of the rescue. Got something to hide? Meanwhile, Alex tried to teach Chico how to swim. He supported his upper body so Chico could make swimming movements with his arms and legs. But somehow it just wasn't working out. They decided to take a break and stood next to each other in the water, contemplating their next attempt. I don't get it. You make the same movements as I do, but you sink anyway, Alex said. But Chico quickly changed the subject. His thoughts still hovered around Bibi's witchcraft and his experience on the beach. Tell me, Bibi, as a witch, can she bewitch anything? Alex looked at him in wonder. No, not everything. Everything doesn't work. She can't interfere with nature, or change the weather or something. Yes, but something like reading minds, for example? Chico wanted to know. Alex shook his head. Then he paused. Although, I wonder if... Well, sometimes I have the feeling that she can look into you. Chico nodded, embarrassed. Ah, yes. But Tina too, Alex added quickly. Sometimes, when I talk to her, it's as if she knows before I even... He literally lost himself in his musings about Tina's way of reading his mind. Chico swallowed. Serio? He said. Alex could infer that this meant seriously. The two boys looked at each other for a moment. Then Alex had to smile. Why do you ask? You got something to hide? Chico replied hastily. No, Bibi is just very special. Water March. Mrs. Martin was standing with the workers alongside the drill when Bibi and Tina arrived at Martin's farm. The noise was still unbearable. Tina quickly dismounted from Amadeus, but Mrs. Martin gave them a sign to be quiet. Shh! Hopefully it's there. No sooner had Tina's mother finished her thought when a spout of water actually shot straight up out of the borehole. Mrs. Martin breathed a sigh of relief. Yes! Martin's farm finally had water again. Tina was ecstatic. Yippee! She yelled, stomping her foot with a clap. As if Tina had magically summoned the weather, a crack of thunder shook the farm. After a seemingly endless wave of humidity and relentless heat, a violent summer storm had brewed, and all at once dropped a deluge of heavy rain. Now Bibi joined Tina as the two friends clapped and danced exuberantly on the wet earth. This was the best. They weren't the only happy crew on the farm. The billy goat, His Highness, poked his head out of the stall. The chickens got excited. The plants opened. Everything longed for the life-giving rain. The weather is really crazy, Mrs. Martin laughed as she danced along, until she suddenly stopped. Oh no! The laundry! The laundry! She ran away laughing, while Bibi and Tina continued dancing in the rain. Chico gladly accepted Alexander's invitation to the castle after the rain's sudden surprise. Soaking wet, they fled into the entrance hall. Astonished, Chico looked around the spacious foyer, where an elaborate oversized crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling. Alex noticed Chico's look and could not resist a comment. This is a bargain from my father. Ugly, isn't it? Chico replied very politely. You know, we're privileged and live much, much easier. He went to open the door of the study. Isn't your father around here somewhere? He asked, suddenly looking a little nervous. Alex shook his head. No, he has appointments because of some damage to the corridor. An unpleasant surprise in any case, and my father hates surprises. Chico listened up. Ah, see? Alex shrugged. Yeah, I'll go grab us some dry clothes. No sooner had he run up the stairs to the upper floor than Chico began snooping around curiously. Impressed, he eyed the pictures on the walls, the beautiful glass display cases, The bookshelves. He read the book titles with reverence and paused at a thick Falkenstein chronicle, which he pulled out and leafed through with interest. Quietly he murmured, "The history of von Falkenstein. Muy bien." He looked up at the portrait of Falco and Alex and smiled. "Your story is my story, too."